The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Hope you had a good weekend. All right, Super Bowl. Let's start off with that. The game itself, a little bit surprising. Man, the Eagles opened up a can of whoop ass on the Chiefs. I think I heard before the game, Jalen Hurts went up to Patrick Mahomes and said, I came here to do two things, whip some ass and chew some bubble gum. And then he looked at Patrick Mahomes and he's like, and I'm all out of bubble gum. I forget where that's from. I always find it funny, though. I haven't used that in a long time. I'll have to add that back to the mix. All right, anyway. Here's what I wanted to talk about in terms of the game. I actually wanted to talk about halftime just for a minute and the Kendrick Lamar stuff. And for now, the only thing I want to point out is the simplicity of some of the takes. And basically, I'll be very honest, at first, I was like, wow, that was pretty boring compared to previous stuff of Bruno Mars, Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson's boob. That was my favorite. But pretty boring overall, right? But then when you really think about it, and if you know anything about Kendrick Lamar is an incredibly, incredibly evil genius, and I mean that in the best way possible, very intelligent rapper. And he's got this crazy feud going on with Drake, which basically plays out through songs and through lyrics. And if you think about that, again, conceptually, that's pretty incredible to be able to, use diss tracks and lyrics to kind of make gigantic, broad stroke statements. And in terms of Drake, there is that ongoing feud, which basically his song, Not Like Us, is pretty much a diss track on Drake being a pedophile. I mean, that's what it kind of comes down to. And if you haven't been following it, Drake kind of went into an area that he's really getting criticized a lot in doing, and that is basically going legal with it. And he pretty much sued Kendrick Lamar, or is suing him. He's suing his record label and saying, he's kind of defamed him through the diss track, which that's pretty crazy. If you think about the fact that he's trying to sue somebody for dropping a diss track on them, that's wild, actually. If anything, you would think Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci would sue Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for RFK Jr. defaming and libeling Gates and Fauci in his book, saying they profited billions of dollars on the vaccine or millions of dollars on the vaccine. But as I talked about last week in, one of the episodes, they have not sued RFK Jr., which is, again, interesting. And by the way, remember, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is also a lawyer himself. So as a lawyer himself, I am sure he clearly thought through all this when committing what he did to pen and paper and ink and putting it into his book, The Real Anthony Fauci. All right, moving on. So again, the whole Kendrick Lamar Drake thing at the Super Bowl, he literally ended up performing Not Like Us at halftime. So kind of ran the risk of, pouring fuel on the fire of that lawsuit. But the bigger thing, and I'm only going to touch on this for a second, is, again, I totally understand how if you looked at that performance without any political lens, or quite frankly, any lens of knowing, again, just how intelligent Kendrick Lamar is, because he really is, you would think oh my God, that was so boring. That sucked. That was not interesting. Wow, halftime show sucked. But I'm telling you, that was by design. It absolutely was. And I'll give you the first thing that kind of got me to, pay attention a little bit more and again, watch it twice. And that was Samuel L. Jackson being dressed as Uncle Sam right out the gate, like right out the gate when they started performing. Think about it. Samuel Jackson, Uncle Sam, dressed up, and he's black. So, like, they were definitely sending a message. Now, I'm not really ready to kind of fully talk about what that message could be because, again, it does confuse me because let's say you agree that Kendrick Lamar, Samuel L. Jackson, all of that had a ulterior motive and intention behind it, right? What I'm a little confused about is, quite frankly, how the NFL would would allow that creative to kind of move forward because I have to imagine they were highly aware of what the performance was going to be, all the aspects of the performance. And the NFL, I mean, they get really criticized for being, super woke and super, I guess, part of the deep state, part of the problem. And even that is funny because that mentality would put the NFL into really the Democrat category. But then I feel like most of the owners of the sports teams, I mean, Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, probably being the best and first example that comes to mind. Robert Kraft, also the owner of the Patriots. I think those are two of the most high profile NFL owners. The guy that owns the LA Rams, Stan Kroenke, he's super high profile as well. But I feel like all these guys, they have to be Republican pro-Trump. I really think they are. I know Robert Kraft is. I know Jerry Jones is. And so anyway, I'm a little bit confused at the overall positioning of all of this, but I'm going to leave you with it was absolutely by design. The way Kendrick Lamar performed, the songs he performed, the things that were said, the things that were shown, it was definitely by design. Now, I'll try to kind of figure out what the intent was, and actually over the next couple days I'm sure like 12 million theories will come out. So, I'll weed through those and see if I can come back with the best. Okay, that's it for that. Moving on. All right, I did want to touch on the situation that's going on with this USAID. And now some people are pronouncing it USAID. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's basically this organization that has been under attack from Elon and the Doge crew in terms of really fleshing it out for corruption and putting a pause on a lot of the spending that it does and a lot of the expenditures, which honestly is a very good thing. I will say this in regards to the entire situation of what's taking place with Elon Musk and his level of, I guess, access and his level of power when it comes to government. Again, I'm not totally good with it. I'm not, and I think I've expressed many times, I'm not totally good with Elon in general. I think there's a level of shadiness to him for sure. And there's a level of like double agent, triple agent, who the hell knows? Like, I definitely do not just take everything for face value and, become an Elon fanboy like so many other people are. And quite frankly, a Trump fanboy like probably those same people are. So I'm not in that camp by any stretch of the imagination. At the same time, I mean, to be fair, I absolutely do think there is tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. And so fleshing that out and getting rid of that, that's something we should all be on the same team about. I think a long time ago, I played the clip of Jon Stewart, I believe, having an interview with someone at the time that was not the Secretary of Defense, but something involved in the Defense Department. Kim something. I'll find it and I'll play it later this week. But she was so defensive in that Jon Stewart interview that he did with her in terms of, calling out the fact that the Defense Department had failed its audit like 6 years in a row, or maybe even more than that. And so the fact that she got so defensive about that, that was really the wake up call to everybody to be like, wait a minute, like what is going on with all this money? And again, we're not talking about small sums of money. We're talking about enormous, enormous sums of money. So let me give a little bit of perspective on this USAID or USID. And just the fact that it's being called two different things right there shows you how intentionally confusing it is, because quite frankly, neither one of those acronyms, whether it's USAID or USAID, neither one are actually correct in the way you think they are. First of all, when people say USAID, they think, okay, this is an organization that delivers aid, financial aid, right? That's not true. When they say USAID, they think, oh, this is America identification. It's a United States of America identification. That's also not true. So USAID stands for United States Agency of International Development. So it's United States Agency of International Development. And so let me read you what it's intended to be. So the United States Agency for International Development is a U.S. government agency responsible for providing foreign aid and development assistance. Its primary mission is to promote global stability, economic growth, humanitarian relief, and democratic governance by addressing issues like poverty, health, education, and disaster response in developing countries. USAID, oh God, I don't even know what to call it now, aims to support U.S. foreign policy objectives by fostering self-reliance and resilience in partner nations. All right, so in a nutshell, think about it as, hey, this is an agency, because again, that A stands for agency. This is an agency developed to really help with poverty, health, education, disaster response in these developing nations. Okay, on the surface, that's amazing. That's fantastic. Wow, that is the United States at the absolute best of being the United States. Now, the problem comes when basically under that guise or under that cover, and this is where it gets like ridiculously confusing, and I'm going to try and keep it simple. But basically, using the cover of goodness and humanitarian efforts, this organization for a long time also is been known to spearhead, covert regime change, meaning it's been known to be the method with which the United States can put the people they want in power in developing countries in order to play ball with the United States and in order to then support whatever the geopolitical positioning of the United States is. In addition, it becomes a situation where it's a way for the U.S. to really gain access to that developing country's, raw materials, minerals, and quite frankly, their natural resources. Now that again, that's not something that is like printed in manuals anywhere, but it absolutely is the root of what's been taking place. And so some of this discovery, so to speak, that, Team Elon and Doge is bringing out, it basically shows that corruption side of it. And so you've got the Democrats saying, oh my God, look, you guys are cutting off, cancer aid to Bangladesh, while the Republicans are saying, wait a minute, look at what's taken place in Bangladesh. We have supported, trans rights in order to then what's word am I looking for? In order to then mobilize the trans community to then do the regime change that we wanted, putting in power who we want in Bangladesh. Now, that, believe it or not, is a legitimately real example that I just gave you. And then here's where it gets super crazy. So, this trans rights in Bangladesh that was supported in order to prepare for a regime change, that was the Republicans basically doing that. So think about that. And that was back in I think 2004, 2005 during the Bush administration. So think about that. Now, granted, trans rights wasn't as big of an issue back then as it is now, but still, you would not have ever expected the Republican Party to champion trans efforts or rights anywhere. And so they did. They did that in Bangladesh back then in order to, again, accomplish their bigger picture goals. It really is difficult to wrap your mind around all this stuff. I totally get it. I really do get it. I went to a Super Bowl party on Sunday, and I tried not to talk about any of this stuff, but then somebody at the party who's friends with my friend who threw it, and she's like, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast. God, it's like blowing my mind, and it's hard to think there's evil, wrapped up in good." And so, we did have a little bit of a chat. I promise I kept it super light. I really did. And I told her, "Hey, if you want to hear more, maybe we'll do it another time." But the point of all that, and honestly, what I loved about the conversation with her was she was just kind of like, I never even remotely thought anything. Not only did she never think about it, because who does think about this stuff, or who did think about any of this stuff? Nobody. I didn't. I didn't think about any of this. But what I loved about what she said was not that I never thought about this, but she basically said, I never expected our country to have the ability to be nefarious, or anyone in our government to do anything besides, what we pay them to do. And I thought that was incredibly insightful of her to recognize, I guess, her previous lack of awareness. And then now, again, she's open to hearing things out. And I love that. And I'm really trying to advocate that with everybody. Just be open to hearing things out. You don't have to agree. You don't have to disagree, but just give it a listen. All right, let me jump back into this USAID. And this was another thing I went into. I actually used Perplexity to kind of go through this discussion. And then I said, why do people say it's for covert regime change? And the answer that came back was, people say USAID, I'm just going to call it USAID. USAID is involved in covert regime change because throughout its history, the agency has been linked to U.S. foreign policy efforts that go beyond humanitarian aid and development. Critics argue that USAID has sometimes been used as a tool for advancing American geopolitical interests, including efforts to undermine or influence foreign governments that are not aligned with U.S. policies. Some reasons for this perception include ties to intelligence operations. USAID has been accused of working alongside the CIA, particularly during the Cold War, to fund programs that indirectly and directly support opposition in various countries. So think about that. This organization has been around since the Cold War. The Cold War, remember, that was with Russia in the 70s and 80s, and it ended in the early 90s with Reagan. And again, remember, I do want to bring this up. When the Cold War with Russia ended, the United States no longer had a big bad wolf. They no longer had an adversary. They no longer had an enemy. There was no boogeyman. You guys know I love to use the term boogeyman. So the boogeyman wasn't there anymore. And that used to be Russia. And if you think about it, that boogeyman of Russia is what enabled the military industrial complex, which was born in the 50s and 60s. Remember, Dwight D. Eisenhower, on his farewell speech, literally said, "Be careful of the military industrial complex." And that led to, John F. Kennedy basically coming in, wanting to get United States troops out of Vietnam. And what happened? 30 days later, he's assassinated. And so, anyway, it's been in the mix a long time. This stuff has been in the mix a long time. And it's interesting that it's coming out now. I guess the question will be, is it coming out to truly call a spade and put an end to it? Or is there another ulterior motive that Trump has and that he's championing, and like he's maybe throwing this all to the wolves, so to speak, but then is he doing something in the background to champion his own, I guess, initiative? That honestly, I mean, that is the way you have to think about this. And I'm telling you, all of you guys that are listening that have Trump derangement syndrome, where you think everything is bad, and then all of you guys that have Trump worship syndrome, that you think everything is good that he's doing, I'd honestly ask you to kind of take both of those perspectives and put them on the shelf, and do not have either one of those. Don't be deranged about them, and don't worship them. And let's see if we can really see what we think he's up to. I mean, honestly, that's what I'm doing. I'm really trying to like figure out, okay, what does this mean? What does that mean? For example, he'll do something which I consider good. He'll, you guys know I've liked some of these executive orders. And then over the weekend on Friday, he appointed this lady to the new position of like Office of Faith. And I have to play this clip for you. So this lady's name is Paula White, and she is like a ridiculed televangelist that Trump put into this new White House faith office. And so listen to this clip of hers that is like going around social media.
I hear a sound of abundance of rain. I hear a sound of victory. I hear a sound of shouting and singing. I hear a sound of victory. For angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata raka deda baka sanda. For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now. They're coming here. They're coming here. In the name of Jesus. From South America. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here.
I mean, the video is even more insane than the audio, but there is just no room for this in government. And I honestly, I'm incredibly disappointed that he even created a faith office. I mean, what's going on with this? And so this is absolutely a storyline in the Trump administration and the Trump legacy that I am following very closely. And that is his, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, potentially being compromised by the evangelical Christians / Zionist Judeo. So it's like the Judeo-Christian cult. And they are kind of a cult. And I've got friends of mine who are like super Catholic or super Christian, who, when I ask them about people like Paula White, I'm like, dude, what do you guys think of this? They're like, these are the type of people that give Christianity a bad name. So again, I'm not saying anything out of turn, and I'm not saying anything that, quite frankly, isn't being said by a lot of people of faith on their own. So anyway, it's just weird, man. This stuff is definitely a little bit off. It's a little bit off. All right, shifting gears. The vaccine stuff, man, it's starting to get more to the forefront. Give this a listen. I'm telling you, more and more people are stepping forward and basically, bringing things out into the open. And again, this is another one where, don't get defensive about anything. Like if you are somebody that bought into the whole COVID vaccine, again, I'm not saying you're wrong, but what I'm saying is we are several years removed from that and things are happening. People are experiencing things. And so unless you're on the payroll, unless you're getting paid by some entity to back that theory or narrative or thought process, don't be open to it, because again, we're talking about your health, or your family member's health or your loved one's health. So give this a listen.
Let's get all the facts on the table. Coronavirus, COVID-19, the whole thing was premeditated. It was murder. It was active terrorism by a state against the world. Let's call it what it is. And let's not pretend like maybe there's a more complex explanation for, the facts. And the facts are, here's the bad news. For 58 years, the United States, the UK, in collaboration with researchers around the world, planned to use coronavirus to instill the most tyrannical reform of society that this generation has ever seen. And they did it purely premeditated to make sure that we were cowed into submission. And the bad news for them is there's a lot of people that didn't take the knee.
All right, I'm blanking on what that guy's name was, but I'll find it because he's actually got a couple good speeches. Anyway, he talks about this going back a long ways, like not just the past couple years, but going back, gosh, he said 58 years they've been planning it. I don't know about that. I mean, who the heck knows? That's pretty crazy if that is the case. But I will say, let's remove that from the equation. I will say again, I do think that what took place was something that could have created a dramatic change in the way we lived our lives and the way we live our lives. But, a lot of people did push back and a lot of people did refuse to basically get the vaccine. So there is a control group. By the way, that's the other interesting thing to think about. With every scientific experiment, there always has to be a control group. And in this case, the control group is the people that did not get vaccinated. And so if, let's say, over the next 4 or 5 years, if they are rightfully and I guess honestly tracking, what happens between folks that are vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and let's say by the year 2030, because that year's got a lot of significance. I'll talk about that in another episode. But let's say by the year 2030, they're able to clearly show with data, assuming this is all done legitimately, which I do not think it will be. But if, all-cause mortality, if rates of cancer, rates of everything basically end up showing that the unvaccinated population was affected dramatically less, I mean, that'll be crazy, I guess. That'll be crazy, I guess. By the same token, again, assuming everything is legit and done correctly, if the numbers don't vary too much, or let's say it shows that the people that were vaccinated, had less all-cause mortality rates, death rates, they had less incidences of cancer, less incidences of this stuff, then it totally disproves all this. But honestly, I hate to say it, but I already know that's not the case, because again, look at I know this is anecdotal, and a lot of people in the medical profession like to say, well, just because your brother, friend, sister, mom, dad, so-and-so, got cancer 3 days after getting vaccinated or died 3 weeks after getting vaccinated, that doesn't prove anything. Like they refer to that as being like anecdotal, and they want more larger scientific results. And again, I guess you do have to understand that to an extent and respect it. But I will tell you, I do personally put stock in, you know, my one of many friends who's called me and said, dude, I got my fourth booster. And that literally that day after, I have not been the same since. I mean, how am I going to not respect that? It's their body. They know their body better than anyone, definitely better than the vaccine manufacturers, and definitely better than me and better than anybody. So I have many, many, many people that have said that exact same thing to me, saying, hey, my mom or dad got it and they just were never the same. They complained about this. They complained about that. This happened, that happened. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to be like, oh no, dude, there's no data across 50 million people showing that that's the case. So I'm sorry, I don't believe you. I mean, that's crazy. You can't not believe somebody. You absolutely have to put stock in what they're saying. And again, even if that's just one person and it's quote unquote anecdotal, it doesn't matter. I mean, to me, there's truth to that and there's value to that. So anyway, all right, there's that topic. All right, next up, TMZ.
We just broke a shocking story. There is a rift, and I think that is an understatement of a word, a rift between Taylor Swift and Blake Lively. Taylor feels like she's been used.
Yeah, used in the middle of Blake Lively's war with Justin Baldoni.
All right, I'll cut it off there, but basically, and maybe this is the last time I'll report on this, but basically, Blake Lively had really leveraged, and that's probably the best word to use, leveraged Taylor Swift, for many years to kind of climb the clout ladder. And she was part of like the people that she was using in order to intimidate Justin Baldoni. And now that Justin Baldoni's pushed back, Taylor Swift wants none of it and she doesn't want to be a part of it. So it looks like they've had a major falling out, and it looks like Taylor Swift and her people are absolutely like kind of going in the other direction because they don't want Taylor Swift's brand associated with this. Taylor Swift's brand is a monster. It really is. And I played that also to kind of talk about how this was the first time, I don't know if you saw it on the Super Bowl, when the camera went to Taylor Swift the first time, man, the entire Caesars Stadium or whatever that thing's called now, the Superdome, they started booing. So she got booed for the first time. So a lot of people were like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Now it could be because, you had, I don't know, pro-Trump crowd. And so you've got all the people that did not like how she badmouthed Trump for all that were attending the Super Bowl. So maybe the boos were from them. But a lot of people think it's because of the association with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, and everybody is now Team Baldoni, and so she got booed. She got booed on TV. That was interesting. So anyway, all right, there's that. Let's see. I'm at 33 minutes. Let me see if there's anything else from today. Oh, you know what? I was going to play you this 25-second clip. If you want to get an idea of what people spent in order to go to the Super Bowl, give this a listen.
30,000.
About 15,000.
$9,000.
I heard my boss was coming. I had to come put on for Trump. You know what I'm saying?
$3,900.
How much did you pay for your ticket?
$8,000.
$6,500 a ticket,
Damn.
which I think was decent.
Once in a lifetime deal.
We sitting down here for 5 stacks.
How'd you finesse the ticket?
Incredibly grateful for my father, Dr. Gary Kramer, over here.
We rich.
Bro.
All right, that would have been better if you saw the people who were saying the different amounts, but I can tell you a lot of them, especially the dude who said he spent $30,000, bro did not look like he should be spending $30,000 on Super Bowl tickets. But then again, who the heck knows? Hey, listen, spend your money on what you want and enjoy it. It's your money. All right, that's it, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, night, whatever. Call a spade a spade. More good stuff coming this week. We'll try to dive into things. Keep me in tune with what you want to hear about.
That was a great way to end it.
This episode was brought to you by the new book, Deep Shallow Dive Into You, available now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in hardcover and paperback. Don't forget to sign up for our new mailing list on our website at deepshallowdive.com.